Listen to this episode if you want a real life case study of how Beekman 1802 has grown to sell over 60 million bars of soap and many other products. As a current 9-figure business owner, we dive into the ins and outs of growing your business at different stages. What he would do if it was today and he was growing his business, what economy are we currently in, and how can you really market a value-driven brand? This business is grown on kindness and community, and we dive into how you can create community at the core of your business as well, so you can scale to big numbers and mass market. This is an absolute masterclass on growing a product-based business. Welcome, Brent Ridge. Brent, you guys have an incredible growth story. Like truly so many ups and downs, so many fun twists and turns. You have reality TV shows, The Amazing Race, events in your local town, moving people out of the city to get them to this cute little Hallmarky style town. Most founders have like this moment where they feel like, okay, wait, I think this is finally going to work. Do you feel like you guys had one of those with Beekman?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say probably when we first launched onto TV retail, it was about year 5 in the growth of the company. That's really what made us think, oh, wow, there is this built up demand for the product and brand. And we finally were able to meet that demand.
Yeah. What year was that?
That was 2014.
Yeah, so it's still kind of close to the advent of social media, which I think is really interesting. And it's because talking about businesses trying to build now versus then, the conversation back then was get on QVC. How can we get on TV? That was the only way for visibility. I think it's really cool to see how things would be different if you guys were to have started now.
Oh, no, absolutely. And we think about that all the time. We started our company in 2009. So Facebook was already around, but there weren't a lot of businesses on Facebook. And even our, early period of reality TV where we had our show, The Fabulous Beekman Boys, or even The Amazing Race, social media, the way it is now, was not like that. Like in 2013, when we were on The Amazing Race, if you had that type of exposure now, it would be huge. But we didn't have that. And actually, we think that in some sense, that actually played out better for us because no one looks at us as a brand that was built by reality TV stars, which is the common thing now. People just look at us as a brand that has built slowly over time.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of really cool, scrappy strategies. I read your book, through the whole book. I would see, oh gosh, you guys were wearing muck boots to red carpets. Like you were really good at seizing the opportunities that you would see. And how can I make this into almost like a marketing thing without it having to feel like marketing, with the t-shirt saying the Beekman Boys on Amazing Race, all of that. When we go back, you're right. People don't see you as a reality star because you guys had so much more than it. It was really bringing your value and your mission through reality as opposed to reality being the thing that blew you guys up.
No, that's right. And I think in retrospect now, when we look back at that time period, the best thing that we have going for us is that it really left all the receipts for how the company started. The very first season of The Fabulous Beekman Boys showed us starting the company. So it wasn't like we had a show and then we decided to start making product. It just captured us trying to start a business.
I mean, there's a couple of other people I think of out there, even like Magnolia, Chip and Joanna Gaines. Like it's similar to the sense of people love to see the behind the scenes. And I think that's kind of the start. It's something that I talk a lot about when I talk to my clients about building community, is that people want to be involved in the growth. It's why we see so many founder-led brands now. And you guys had really cool community growth strategies from day one. Your book is all about community. And I think it's really cool that I've read a lot of business books and a lot of them are like, here's the tangible tactics, all of this. And your whole chapter on marketing is kindness, like love thy neighbor and really look at everybody as a person and how can you move through it with that. When it comes to community building, which is truly at the core of your guys' business growth, how were you sticking to that in the world of a bunch of noise of business and tactics and sales and strategies?
I think it really goes down to what lies at the core of the brand. We started the business in the midst of the recession in 2008. And, we always said we were growing the business neighbor by neighbor. And that's why we always called every customer a neighbor. Even to this day, every customer, they call themselves neighbors. I think that's just part of our DNA and people expect it from us. And those little cues, like if they come to our website and they place an order, they get their receipt and it says hi neighbor on it. We don't have customer service. We have neighbor services. So people already from the very beginning understand that this is a brand about community. Part of that came from, yes, we started in the middle of the recession and didn't have a marketing budget. So we really did, rely on word of mouth and people telling people about the product. It was just really about how we could get other people to talk about the brand and get other people involved in the brand. And that's still how it is today. And even if you look at any of our social media accounts today, it really does feel like we are building a community, building a neighborhood together.
Yeah, it totally does wholeheartedly. And if you look at your marketing feels a different way than an average beauty brand. Like you come in contact with it and there just is this warmth, and you guys are so good at staying true to that and really showing you're a great example of how you put those little pieces throughout every touch point within your emails, on your website, your social, like every touch point has that true core value. And I think a lot of times brands start out that way because they're like, oh, I'm going to be this community driven. It's going to be warm. I'm so involved. And then as they scale, it kind of dilutes a little bit, where you guys have really stayed true to it over time.
Yeah, and I think that, we do work really hard at that. And, a lot of times, our farm is still there in Sharon Springs, New York. Farmer John, the original farmer who brought his goats to the farm, is still there. Our flagship store, the Kindness Shop, is still there in Sharon Springs, and people make pilgrimages from all over the world to this little village, that original store. And, people just feel this connection to the brand, and we just try to make sure that all of our team members help perpetuate that. So however the customer is coming into contact with the brand, we want them, the consumer, to feel that connection, however that is. And even, for instance, when we're on QVC, when a customer service person at QVC takes a phone call, they will actually say, hi neighbor, to the person who's calling into QVC, because people realize how important that is to the ethos of the brand.
Yeah. And I say the phrase disruption is in the details all the time. And that's what you're doing there, is like, it is the smallest things that become the big thing. It's like the ripple effect that neighbor has had. And you've done such a good job of really building that over time. When we look at your products, it's something that's really interesting. I have a bar of soap. I've used your soap for years. I look at a bar of soap, and maybe back in 2010, the industry looked a little different, but it is a very saturated industry now of soap. And even when you were coming through, 2010, 2014, I'm sure it is a very saturated industry. It's soap. How do you feel that you were able to differentiate within product perspective, or did you differentiate more on brand?
Ooh, I actually think we did both, and I think that's why we've been successful. When we first started making the very first bars of soap, our original tagline was soap for sensitive people. And we knew even back then that goat milk had the same pH as human skin. So when you cleanse with it, you don't disturb the pH barrier of the skin. 16 years ago, people were not talking about skin barrier and skin health the way we were. And so that kind of set our bar of soap off a little bit differently from most of the competition. So even in those early days, we started getting this groundswell of people who had sensitive skin or had skin issues who would find their way to Beekman because someone used it, said, oh, it helped my skin, you should use this too. And then I think from a branding standpoint, like if you just look at the bar of soap, which by the way, we've now sold 60 million bars of this soap.
Insane.
In the past 16 years. If you look at the size of the soap, it's a very big bar of soap. Each bar weighs over half a pound. When it's sitting on a store shelf, it looks different from any other bar of soap out there because it's so large. And the reason it is so large, and it's not because we thought, oh, how can we stand out? But we had gone to this, after we'd scaled up big enough where we could no longer produce the bars of soap ourselves on the farm. We found this family-owned business in Tennessee who was using equipment that was originally developed during the World War to send bars of soap to the soldiers. So every soldier would get a big bar of soap when they deployed overseas, and that bar of soap lasted them. And so it was that big bar of soap. And so we made that story about, hey, we're working with this family-run company and on this equipment that was developed to make bars of soap for the soldiers so that they would have a little piece of home when they went overseas. We made that a part of our storytelling. And so the power of the product and the goat milk in the product and the size impression of the product, those two things together really made that bar of soap stand out.
Totally. It's substantial and it feels luxury. And I feel like in the soap, especially goat milk soap now, you find a lot of soap that just feels like there's a lot of people that make it from home and sell it and it's wonderful. But what yours feels is like a premium product, looking at the packaging and the substantial nature of it.
Yes, and that is because most at-home soap makers, and we love every goat milk bar soap maker out there because they just help us build the importance of goat milk in the beauty industry. What makes ours different from a lot of those at-home soap makers is that we triple mill the bars of soap, which is a classic French tradition in soap making. So it makes that super luxurious, super creamy, super dense bar of soap.
Frothy, yeah. I think that's really cool. And it's cool to see a product that is so saturated and that you guys still are able to differentiate. It's something we talk about a lot here is because people are so nervous to jump into an industry that is saturated. Granted, you guys started 16 years ago, but if people were to come in now, how do you think people can kind of look at their product across any industry? We have people from all consumer brands that really do differentiate.
Well, I think, we live in an attention economy and you have, 3 seconds to capture someone's attention. And you can either do that by a really strong visual around your product. And you can take even the most mundane product to create an amazing visual around it.
Yeah.
Or you can create an amazing instant hook or story to the product and then show the product later. But you have to have one of those things. So I think if you're developing a new product now, you have to think, how can I capture the customer's attention within 3 seconds? Because it doesn't matter if you have the best product in the world, the most scientifically advanced product is going to change people's life, as soon as they use it. If you don't capture their attention and get it into their hands, it doesn't matter. Can you capture someone's attention in 3 seconds with your product? How can you do that?
Yeah, we're starting to see that a lot across like really boring industries like Graza olive oil. People
Amazing.
Probably like roll their eyes at me because I talk about them all the time because I think it's a great example of the olive oil. It was kind of a snooze fest of an industry for a really long time. And then Graza came out and now we're starting to see a couple more starting to infiltrate. And they're such a great example of that. And the reason I bought them and I was like, who is this? I bought it because I was walking down the aisle. I'm like, this is fun. This grabbed my attention immediately in the retail spot that is super boring.
That's right. And you have to think about that. Where are you selling the product? The example I was given with the 3 second attention is commonly what's cited for online, for DTC, because you're trying to get something on social media. But the same thing happens in the grocery store aisle or in, any type of store. Someone's just walking by. They're often distracted because they're looking at their phone or they're in a conversation with someone. Pretty much anywhere you are these days, you have 3 seconds to capture someone's attention. So how are you going to do that? And if you think about the olive oil aisle, you typically have all of these either square glass bottles or round green bottles, lined up. So that plastic squeeze bottle with the spout, that just stood out. It was different. Yeah. So it made you say, oh, what's that?
Yeah, 100%. And I always say if people are over here, we want to figure out how we can be here to really get people connected to it. I think it's really interesting. Something that stood out to me in your book and your whole story is you guys went from soap and being in anthropology, you have like 52,000 bars or something crazy. You guys had to wrap yourselves. And then Target came to you and said, will you guys do a food line? And now you ended up as skincare. Can you kind of tell us that progression there? And looking back on it, what are your thoughts about the whole thing?
Yeah, our company has just evolved over time. We never set out to become a beauty company or a skincare company. When we first started the company back in 2009, my background was in medicine, and then I had gone back to business school and then went to work at Martha Stewart, where I was heading up her health and wellness division. So when we lost our jobs in the recession, my most recent experience was working for Martha, who had this amazing lifestyle company that had all of these different product content verticals. And so that was our original model. We're like, how can we create something that is like what Martha is doing, but it'll be a little bit more kind of down to earth and back to the farm in its storytelling. And so originally we had several different verticals of product. We had the bars of soap and some moisturizers that we'd started making with the goat milk. Then we had a gardening vertical where we're designing gardening products. We had a home decor vertical. And then we had a food vertical. And when we started out, we were really heavily dependent on getting PR, earned media. And so we said, okay, every quarter, we're going to launch a product in a different category. So if we were launching a big launch in Q1 with beauty, then in Q2, it was going to be a gardening product. And in Q3, it was going to be a home decor product. So we could always be out in the press with a different story. And that's how we were growing for the first few years of the company. At one point, we were working with over 300 different artisans and craftspeople, great product. And I would say beauty was always the biggest vertical, but every vertical was growing kind of steadily. And then we had this opportunity after we ran the Amazing Race. Target came to us and said, oh, well, we love this farm story. Would you ever want to do a food product line based on your life on the farm? And we said, okay, we'll do that. However, the twist on it was that we wanted to make sure that at least one ingredient in every product that we created was sourced from a small farm, not a big, industrial agricultural farm. And so they worked with us to do that. I mean, we basically redesigned how food product was made for the Target shelf. And it was very laborious and very expensive, and probably why it failed, because we put all the resources into production and had no money to spend on the marketing. But then when we launched on TV in the beauty category, that just took off. And we realized, oh yes, while our customers loved all of these different things that we were doing, they were most in love with the skincare products. And so then we said, okay, you always have to listen to your customer. And if they're telling you that's what they're most interested in, then that's what we have to be most interested in.
Yeah, you kind of cast the wide net first, and then you pick and choose where the most attention kind of naturally gravitated towards. And it makes sense to go that way. Do you ever see yourself expanding into other verticals again? Or do you guys think you're pretty set into the skincare world?
Well, at this point, we've advanced so much into being almost like a biotech company, because we really do research the goat milk, its influence on the microbiome of the skin, the exosomes that we're using from the goat milk to deliver ingredients into the skin. So it would be probably hard for us to go back all the way to where we began. Yeah. However, I do think that wellness is taking over basically every category, every consumer product category. And so I do think that under the rubric or the umbrella of wellness, we could potentially enter other categories at some point, as long as our goal is, how are we going to make your life healthier? Is that going to be on the surface of the skin? Is it going to be something you put inside your body? Is it going to be something you bring into your home? How do we create this ecosystem of health that ultimately is going to show up on the surface of your skin?
Yeah, you're very right with wellness infiltrating absolutely everything. And there are ways that you can kind of take all of these little offshoots as you go. When we're talking about scaling here, and I kind of want to talk about almost like different stages, because I know a lot of the listeners are at $100,000 to like $5 million in revenue. There's a lot of bottlenecks that pop up as you consistently get more and more capacity, more and more sales coming in. When you look back at maybe like, let's say like 500,000, 5 million, and like 50 million, what do you feel are some of the most important things to be ready for as you scale, as kind of like bottlenecks that pop up?
I think for us, the biggest bottleneck has been working with your distribution channel, because obviously as you're growing to get to those bigger numbers, most people are not going to reach that just on DTC. And the more distribution channels you work through, the more expensive it becomes to service those distribution channels. Each of them have their own marketing programs, their own promotional cadence, their own very specific ways of doing business and lingo. And so you have to start hiring people specifically for those channels. And then once you get into so many different channels, then the retailers are like, oh, well, we need something unique from you so we can differentiate your product in our location so that it's different from something you're going to get somewhere else. So then you have to start designing specific product for those retailers. And then that becomes, another hassle, because you're like, okay, what's my minimum order quantity going to be on this? Can I justify the outlay of cash for the inventory, for the design process, for the formula development? So I think that becomes the bottleneck, is your distribution. And I do think that we're coming out of the height of the DTC era, where I don't think any business is going to grow probably past 5 million on DTC alone, unless you happen to be, Hailey Bieber, where you've got a huge amount of celebrity following and you can really drive people there. I think it's almost impossible for anybody else to do that. So you need to start thinking, what is going to be my first, second, third distribution channels and how do I prepare my business to meet those challenges when I enter into those different channels.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think many people are starting D2C now, which it makes sense. Social media, it's where you can go. It's like an easy, low barrier to entry. You pack orders out of your house like you guys are doing. And, you jumped into anthropology kind of quickly, right? And I don't really remember exactly how quickly, but I remember it being early on enough that you guys were packing orders in your home still. And that is even distribution in and of itself. As I have clients that are trying to get into these major retailers, like you have to be ready for a 50,000 unit order if that is something that you're going to go for.
That's right. And, at that period of time, we like to say we were one of the first DTC beauty brands because, back in 2009, there weren't that many e-commerce brands out there. And we soon realized that we were not going to be able to grow the business and pay off $1 million mortgage on our farm just with the sales from our DTC. And that's really why we went into anthropology. And when we made the deal with anthropology, we were so desperate to get national distribution that we basically gave the bars of soap away. I think we made maybe 20 cents a bar. It was a calculated risk. We're like, okay, we need the exposure. We'll do anything we need to do in order to get on that shelf. And, we believed in our product. We knew it was a great product. So the gamble was, yes, people are going to buy it. They're going to love it. They're going to come back. And I think you do have to weigh all of your risk and opportunities that way. And, sometimes you have to take the gamble and hopefully, it pays off.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a through point of a lot of the things that you talk about in your book is you took a lot of opportunities just to see if it worked. You were really gritty. And I think the idea of grit back in 2014, 2010 looks a little different than gritty today. Like I would say if people are talking about grittiness today, they're talking about maybe sending a bunch of emails and posting a bunch of content where the grittiness looked very different back then because it's wild to think. I mean, I ran a blog in 2016. We were still called bloggers. Like we weren't called influencers yet. And it's like very recent that e-commerce is the e-commerce that we have today. It really is within the last 10 years. Even social media, that I feel like your guys' grittiness is something that people could still use today. Yeah. All of those fun, unique opportunities we do see, but I think people they almost just gravitate towards the social media. They gravitate towards, I'll just send some emails as opposed to trying to come up with almost like more of those guerrilla marketing tactics.
I mentor a lot of young beauty founders now. We always say mentorship is an act of kindness. So we try to mentor as many people as possible. And, I tell people these days, yes, you can still grow a business from $0 to $5 million online, but you have to be really dedicated and really focused on it. And I was just having this conversation with a young founder a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, should I try to pursue going into Sephora or Ulta, or should I, try to do these other retail partners? And I'm like, if I was starting over right now today, I would go all in on TikTok Shop. And if you're going to do that, which I do think is the right thing to do, you need to commit to going live for 4 hours a day and talking about your product and selling your product for 4 hours a day, even more. If you can do more every day of the week. So even though the grit back in our day was, yes, we're rolling up our sleeves and we're wrapping each bar of soap, the grit today is, can I go live for 4 to 8 hours telling the world about my product and selling my product myself? Because that's how you make it work.
Yeah. If you were to start over today, you would go digital first, fully. I really feel that it's not going away. It's where the customer already is. Retail is seeing a decline in many ways that it's going to be really interesting just because even as you say, it's hard to scale past 5 million D2C alone. It's going to be interesting to see in the next 10 years where that goes because retail is changing and so many of these other sales channels have really changed as well.
Yeah, and I think if you are someone who you are the manufacturer of your product, so you control that inventory and that production process, you should be the direct salesperson. It becomes challenging when you're sourcing the product from someone else and then you're trying to sell it and everyone's getting a cut of the product. But if you are making that product yourself, then you need to develop the skill to sell that product yourself. And if you think about what we did on TV retail, that was basically what we were doing. Live selling on social didn't exist then. QVC was the original kind of live selling opportunity. And that is where you can really make the money, is when you are selling it yourself because you're making it yourself.
And the profit, you're so right, is the amount of profit you can make when you're just, making your own product, doing your own thing. Hey, I've been getting some DMs that you may not know what I do outside of hosting this podcast. I actually work with product-based business owners every single day to help them grow and scale their brand. If you really want my eyes one-on-one inside of your business to look at your strategy, to look at your funnels, to look at your data, and to develop your next campaign or bring your business or your idea to life, that is exactly what I do every single day. I've worked with 500 plus businesses across 70 different industries to help them become the next household name in their industry. If you are craving a business brain, a strategic advisor, a data-centered, obsessed person to come into your business and help you bring your idea to life, I'm your gal. Come on over to my Instagram at @thisismadison page, DM me support. Otherwise, you can click the link in the show notes to apply today. Okay, back to the episode. So everybody listening that hasn't read the book yet, you guys will have to. It's called How to Build a Truly Great Brand, Goat Wisdom. Yay! You talk about how early on you guys got a 52,000 unit, I believe, anthropology order, and you hand wrapped 52,000. You called in neighbors, physical neighbors, and you guys were wrapping orders into the night. How did you know when you were at the point, like what metrics, what signals did you have that you knew it was time to outsource production, outsource fulfillment, get a 3PL, things like that?
Well, I would say when we got on TV retail and after the first few months on TV retail, we're like, oh, wow, this is going to be big. We really need to start scaling up, which we did. And so we reached out to another partner who was already in the manufacturing business of beauty products and co-packing of beauty products. And we said, you know what, we've launched on TV and it's getting really quickly out of what we can manage on our own. Can we work with you? Can you help us? And they're like, yes. They said, yes, we can do that. It was another family run business called STA Elements. So we partnered to really grow the TV business. And within the first 3 years of our partnership, we became the biggest portion of the revenue of their company. And so then we decided, oh, why don't we just merge our two companies? And so what that did was it helped us have our entire own warehouse, all of our own warehousing. And we actually didn't start outsourcing to a 3PL until 2 years ago. We had all of our own warehousing because we had purchased this company that had that pre-existing infrastructure.
Interesting. So you basically built in-house as opposed to outsourcing.
That's right.
It's something we talk about a lot is when people are scaling, even like teams, whatever, is it worth it to bring people in-house and like you be able to have them as your own employees because there's so many agencies now and specialists that people can hire instead. Does it make more sense to have in-house PR, in-house wholesale rep, in-house as opposed to having all of these specialists that again take a larger cut just because they have profit built into all of their retainers and all of that as well? That's really interesting that it wasn't until recently that you guys had to go to a 3PL.
That's right. That's right. Because it just made more sense financially for us to go to a 3PL. And I think, as you pointed out, there's so many different consultants and agents who can help you with any aspect of your company from, a fractional CEO, fractional CMOs, fractional CFO. You can find someone to help you out. Really look at what is going to help take your company to the next level with a skill set that you don't have. That is where you want to make your first investment in hiring someone else. If you're like in a $5 million to maybe $50 million company, you don't have to have a huge internal team. You can outsource a lot of that with fractional help. I think probably once you get above 50 million, then it's probably going to be more beneficial for you to hire the talent in-house. But you can get pretty far by doing fractional hiring.
Yeah, well, there's so many people doing fractional agencies, specialists, whatever it is right now. You can have so many. And it is great because there's a lot of costs to having W-2 employees and having some of those people. You can actually do it a lot more cost effectively. When I think about a lot of the things that you talk a lot about like frugality throughout your book and how, in business, especially in like those gritty starter years, frugality is everything because you're kind of milking every dollar you can. For no pun intended.
I got that. Milking.
Yeah, no pun intended, but it works. How do you feel like that frugality has changed over the years, or have you kind of kept it as throughput into your business?
It's definitely a throughput. We call it kind of our, what can we do for $0? Because when we started out the company, we had $0 to spend on anything. So, we were taking money out of our own pocket to pay for the ingredients to make the product and running the farm and whatnot. And even to this day, particularly in marketing, we will always tell our team, okay, here's a new product launch. How can we get the word out about this product and spend $0? And that's kind of how we start every brainstorming session, because we find that when people have $0 to spend, we're like, no, you have no money to spend. What can you do? We find that the creativity and the strength of the ideas that come out of that are so powerful. And then we will find among all of those ideas that come out in this kind of $0 brainstorming session, the idea that is worth putting money behind, which I think is very different from how a lot of companies do marketing. A lot of companies will say, okay, I have 10% of my revenue is devoted to marketing. So you'll give someone the marketing budget and you'll say, okay, how can I spend $100,000? And then you spend the $100,000 and you're like, oh, wait, did I get the bang for my buck out of that $100,000 I spent? But if you start by saying, what can I do with $0 and then allocate the money very, very specifically to an idea that really is a winning idea, that's the better way to do it. And I think people are actually coming back to that in social media marketing now, where particularly with the use of AI, you can generate so many different ads that you can A/B test. Or if you're working with content creators or influencers, you can see what's naturally working organically. And then you can put money behind something that is already showing that it can work before you're spending money up front.
Yeah, that's a really good point is, you put so much time and effort into social. And when you see, okay, this one kind of popped, why don't we put some money behind it then? And I think a lot of people, when they see brands at the size that you guys have at this point, they just think, oh, well, they could afford anything. They have massive budgets. It's going to be totally fine. But life is so different for me. There's no way I can do those things. But the question of how can I do this for $0? It's something anybody can use. It's something at any stage. How can we do something for $0? And you're right. When you have this pool of money, it's kind of like I just got married in October. It's like people getting married. They know that you're just pulling from a pool of money. You're going to start spending dollars all the time. But if you were to say, okay, how could I do a really cool wedding with as little money as possible? It's the same way as what you can think about for marketing is, social is free. And it's honestly a lot of times why that's where we have to go. And it's why so many people have taken advantage of it. But
going back to what we were talking about with TikTok Live or even Instagram Live, if you go on and you're like, okay, I'm going on for 4 hours every day, right? You will find very quickly either what resonates with people because they're going to engage. You said something or you showed something and that really got people excited. It's like real-time market research. You can know, okay, I'm going to lean in. I'm going to show that again. I'm going to show it right now again. You can learn by that, but you can't learn unless you're actually doing it. And so you have to actually do it. And then what's great about TikTok algorithm is that the TikTok algorithm is going to tell you what was the most popular segment of your 4-hour live section because it's going to send that out to more people. And so you can just watch what TikTok has picked up in the algorithm and say, oh, wow, that's what people were interested in. Okay, that's what I'm going to lean into. You've got all the data that you could ever need at your fingertips to work in a very efficient way, but you just have to follow where the data is leading you.
Yeah, I'm a big data girl. And I think when we start to look at value mission driven brands, people almost think it's either or when it comes to it. It's like you either are mission driven or you have these strategies and this data and these tactics, but you just kind of have to blend these two things together. And the data is so necessary because like you're saying, it's how you can make decisions. It's how you adapt what you're doing and it's how you do everything else. When you look at brands, I know you said you're a mentor for a lot of young brands today. When you look at those brands, what are some of the other things that you're telling them to do that maybe if you guys were starting today that you would be doing instead?
Everybody needs to remember that we are in an attention economy. Almost any consumer good that you're producing is already out there. Innovation in consumers goods, it's really hard to achieve where something has never been out there on the market before. Really look for whatever white space you can. And if you have a product that is more of a commodity, then you have to think, okay, how visually is it going to stand out? So you just have to think of how you're going to find that white space. And it might not be an actual product white space. It could be the visual white space, or it could be the communication white space. You just have to think about what is that white space and how am I going to fill that so that I can stand out from everywhere else.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Something that you say in your book, I marked it here and I want to read it quick, is that you talk about emotional connection. You said you can spend a lot of money for awareness, but if you're not making an emotional connection with your customer, there will be no conversion. And if there's no conversion, there's no loyalty. And if there's no loyalty, there's no lifetime value. It's the connection with the customer, not the rational one. When you look at emotional connection, how do you feel that somebody actually tangibly builds that emotional connection, not just for the first sale, but for the repeated sale and for the retention attention of that customer.
Yeah, I think this is so important. That was really smart. I'm glad I put that in the book. That sounds
What a good point I made.
We always say you can sell one product one time. That's actually pretty easy. The first sale is actually pretty easy. It's that repeat sell that is really important. And I think you have to think about, okay, when the customer gets this product in their hand, when they use it, you have to already think beforehand how you're going to then convert them into buying the next product or, replacing that product. And that either has to be how you're communicating it on the package, or if you have an amazing product and you know they're going to love the product, how are you going to make sure that they remember, oh, I'm out of that product. I need to go back. Because again, we're in an attention economy. So even if they love your product, they're easily going to be distracted by the next shiny thing that shows up or the next thing on the shelf and this on the end cap. So you have to constantly be thinking, okay, how am I going to constantly make that person remember my product? And particularly, it's easier if you're doing a DTC business because you can get people quickly into a funnel. Like, oh, okay, they bought the bar of soap. What's my next communication going to be for them? Or if they bought one of our moisturizers, we know that the moisturizer, if people are using it as most people do, as directed, it's going to, last them 4 to 6 weeks. That's exactly when we need to send out the next email because we know they're getting to the bottom of it. And if they've gotten to the bottom of it, that means they must have liked it. So how do we remind them, oh, you're almost at the bottom of that, time to replenish or get into our subscription program. So you just always have to think about the next purchase. Don't just think about the first purchase. And I think that emotional connection is so powerful because if you can make that emotional connection, which is hard to do, you have to work less hard to remind them because they're going to feel it and they're going to be reminded on their own. And for us, like if you look at any of our packaging, we do it in a couple of different ways. One is the use of the color yellow, which is, we know that the color yellow spikes serotonin in the blood. When people see the color yellow, it makes serotonin spike. And so serotonin is the feel-good kind of hormone. All of our products have yellow on them somewhere. So we know if it's sitting there on your counter, it's going to make you feel good. So that's one thing. And then we very liberally use images of the baby goats because that's memorable. People think of baby goats as something cuddly and it's just very memorable. And even in our mascot, we have this tiny little mascot called Goaty, who is the global ambassador for kindness. And he's this kind of little kawaii drawing of a goat, kind of in the style of Hello Kitty. And that style was chosen very specifically because that kawaii aesthetic has been shown to increase oxytocin levels in the blood. And oxytocin is that hormone that makes us feel connection. When moms are breastfeeding, oxytocin is what makes the mom and the baby bond during breastfeeding. And the reason the kawaii design elicits that same oxytocin surge is because if you think of that design, like think of Hello Kitty, if you know Hello Kitty, or even Mickey Mouse, right? It's this image that has a large head, it has large eyes, but a really small body comparatively to the size of the head and the eyes. That is a very specific way of drawing an animation because it makes us think of babies. And when we think of babies, which typically have big heads, big eyes as proportionate to the size of their face, tiny bodies in proportion to the size of their head, it makes us want to care for them and protect them. And so it makes you love them. And so that's why we choose the types of imagery we choose when we're even thinking of something as our little icon, Goaty, because we want people to feel for the product.
Yeah, it goes back to that detail and truly the disruption. It's those little things that make a big difference. And I hope everybody listening can hear like the intentionality behind the colors of the packaging, the little icons, the neighbors on the emails, little things like that. It really is when people are like, how do I build community? It's nothing that remarkable. It's just very small details over and over and over again that elicit similar emotions, that bring your value forward, that have all of these little pieces that it's so important to really see that it doesn't have to be anything that massive. You don't have to have a reality TV show to build a community.
That's right. And, you let your community build itself and then you add fuel to it as much as you can. And I'll think of one example that has worked wonderfully for us. And it's one of the things I love doing the most, actually. Early on in the company, again, because social media was just starting out when we started our company, people would write us handwritten letters and say either your product changed my skin, or I love what you're doing on the farm, or I love that your purpose is kindness and putting more kindness out to the world. We get all of these handwritten letters. And so I would save them up, and like once a month, I would go live on either Facebook or Instagram, and I would say, opening the mailbag live today, and I would just sit there for like 30 minutes or an hour, just opening up the letters and reading them. Not only did that give social validation, right? Because people are like, wow, this product must be really good, or this brand must be amazing because these people are taking time to write these letters. So there was that degree of social validation, but then it became self-perpetuating because people are like, I'm going to write a letter and maybe he'll read my letter live too. And then I can have my 15, seconds of fame when he's reading my letter. And so it became this self-perpetuating thing and this community builder. And it was completely free. You can do so many things like that to build your community. I don't know if you ever listened to Gary Vaynerchuk, who I think is so funny and so smart and just, says it like it is on so many things. He talks about people who are just starting out on their social media, trying to sell. And he's like, I cannot tell you how many people, starting out their businesses, they'll make a post and I'll look at their post and maybe they'll have 3 or 4 comments and they have not even taken the time to respond to those 3 or 4 comments. If you make a social post and you can't even make a personal reply to 4 comments, you're never going to grow your business because you're not dedicated enough to growing your business. And I think that was such a powerful thing to hear and such a powerful message. If you can't make that little effort, then you're not going to have the strength or the energy to make the effort that you need to grow and scale the business.
Yeah. Well, we're in a world where that is also giving people permission to comment more. If they see like you opening the letters, that was people saying, wait, I should send letters. I want to be a part of this. And if people look in your comments and they're just all these unread random comments, they're not going to also comment, which isn't, again, fueling the algorithm, fueling the fire of everything else, because they're saying, this person must not actually want to respond to me. But if they see that they're responding to everybody, it makes them feel included. I call it the two-way communication, is that we need to assume that there's 2 ways of communication here to get more communication back to you from your community as well.
You're so right. And ultimately you'll get to the point, because as you said, yes, when you're commenting and engaging with your community, the algorithm, boosts you. You will get to the point, hopefully, where you're getting so many comments that you can't physically respond to all of them. However, then it actually becomes even more self-perpetuating because say you're going to respond to 10% or maybe 20% of the comments, right? Then people who are reading through the comments, they're going to say, oh, well, this is the type of comment that gets the response. So I'm going to put more thought into the comment that I leave because then they're going to be more likely to reply to my comment. So instead of people just making random statements, they're actually putting a thought process into it, which then builds your community even stronger because they're making content for you on your behalf. Every comment is content. Yeah, and if you can get your customers to create content on your behalf, that's when you're in the flywheel.
For sure. I mean, it just snowballs from there because then 10% of every sales are actually leading to more sales and you can kind of snowball it. And I think that is a great kind of wrap up here of our conversation is something that you talk about is the neighbor by neighbor by neighbor, which is basically, how can we really bring kindness to people and really grow this thing neighbor by neighbor by neighbor. And some people on a tangible perspective would call it kind of like referrals, building word of mouth and really sharing those different pieces there. And when you build community, you have natural more word of mouth. You've also said that you've built this community and you've seen kindness through your neighbors back to each other because you have basically set this scene here of how you get to build the culture in your business. And when it really comes to community building, because that is something I preach, it is something my audience knows that they really need to build. And it's something that's nearly necessary in the world that we live in today with businesses. Customers want value and mission more than anything. What do you think is most important for people to remember when it comes to community building and building with a mission-driven purpose?
You're naturally going to attract the type of people who feel some sort of connection to you. Like everybody comes either because they have sensitive skin or because they like this idea of I can put more kindness out into the world. And I start that with self-kindness. So people naturally, they self-select to buy our product because as we said, it's a very saturated market. So your consumer will self-select because they like something that you're doing. Then once they've done that, then you lean into what they're saying. You respond to them. If they leave a great comment or they write a letter, how can you amplify that in some way so that more people see what they said about you?
Yeah.
Or maybe they made a video saying, oh, I loved this book or I love this bar of soap so much. Well, then maybe that's worth you taking $50 and, amplifying that video. so that more people hear this person speaking on your behalf. And that's how you grow the community. It's actually much easier than people want to make it be.
Yeah, don't overcomplicate it. See what's working and keep amplifying what's working. That's great. Brent, this has been such a lovely conversation. Everybody, goat wisdom, how to build a truly great business. Brent, where can people find you, the Beekman boys, your business, all of the things?
They can find Beekman products on our website, beekman1802.com, on Amazon, at Ulta Beauty, at QVC. They should always reach out. Our personal Instagram account is at Josh and Brent, or I'm Brent Ridge, MD, on LinkedIn. If I have the time, I'd love to provide my advice and help other entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Everybody go follow them, check them out. Brent, thank you so much for being here. This was lovely.
Thanks, Madison.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Growth Podcast. We put out new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. So if you love this one, make sure that you're subscribed so you never miss a conversation. If you want more conversations with me and other business owners, make sure that you join our completely free podcast community, the Founders Cafe. The link is in the show notes. You can get bonus resources, access to free coaching calls, as well as connect with like-minded business owners like yourself. Make sure that you rate and review the podcast 5 stars, share it with a friend to keep those conversations moving, and come back every Tuesday and Friday. I'll see you there.